Okay, we'll be getting started very shortly. We'll be getting started soon. I'm going to get the latest on Idalia tonight. So, waiting for a few more people to join on the live stream. How's everybody doing out there? As always, I'm the Bearded Weatherman, former Navy meteorologist, current airline meteorologist. So, hope everybody's doing well out there. If you're watching, just go ahead and leave a comment and let me know where you're watching from. Like to get an idea where everybody's at, so I can kind of hone in on those areas, get you the information you need. Or if you're watching later, leave a comment. I do check in on those comments. So again, go ahead and leave a comment and let me know what's going on out there, guys. Okay, I've got Ashley. She's watching from Pensacola. As always, Ashley, thanks for stopping by. Appreciate your support. All right, we're going to get started here very shortly, guys. Got Sue. Sue is watching from DeLand, Florida, my hometown. Welcome, Sue, as always. Longtime supporter of the page. Appreciate you guys for supporting me all these years. Very, very, very much appreciate it. And, yeah. How about we get started? We got a few people in here, and I know you want to get this information. Talking about Tropical Storm Idalia. Idalia. I don't know. In the south, it sounds more like, I think we would pronounce it more like Idalia. So, in any case, let's get started. All right, how's everybody doing out there? Again, leave a comment. Let me know where you're watching from tonight. I've got Linda. She's watching from NSB, New Smyrna Beach, there in Volusia County. Edgewater, technically, that's okay, right there, close by, Volusia County. Checking in, as always, my home county, my home town there in DeLand. So, appreciate your support, guys, over the years. I recognize some names, so again, just really appreciate it. As always, if you like what you're seeing, you go ahead and leave a like on the video. Go ahead and share with friends. They need this information too. You know, if they're in the path of the storm or might be affected, they probably would appreciate some additional information beyond the 5-minute segment they get on TV, you know, or the endless things on Weather Channel. You know, I try to go more in depth. You know, I try to keep it pretty casual. People over the years have said, why don't you get a green screen? Why don't you get a studio? No, I'm just doing this for my office here at the house. You know, I wear my t-shirt. I can keep my beard. You know, I'm sort of a different style of weatherman or meteorologist. So that's my kind of thing. You know, I'm not trying to change the formula too much for you. But I do have that background in meteorology from... Well, I'm also in meteorology at the airline I work for out here in Salt Lake City, and also from the Navy when I served in the Navy, forecasting for ships at sea out in the Atlantic Ocean, tropical Atlantic. We did tropical meteorology, so we definitely I definitely have a background in these sorts of things, and we're going to talk about meteorology here in a minute. I got Trudy checking in from Ocean Springs, Mississippi. I actually worked in Ocean Springs. I lived in Biloxi for a little while, so that was a little while down, you know, before here now, but there in Biloxi, I was at Keesler Air Force Base where I did my training in the Navy with the 53rd Weather Squadron, the Hurricane Hunters. So definitely have some experience there with the Mississippi Gulf Coast. We'll talk about, you know, what it looks like over there, that far west as far as impacts. I'm sure Trudy's very interested in that. We got Lisa checking in. Lisa, longtime follower as well, from Claremont, right outside Orlando. So she's obviously paying very close attention to where this storm might end up heading. As we've been seeing this storm track, the forecast at least, track further to the east, kind of in line with the Euro, as sort of I've been saying. And, you know, I posted about this storm a week ago. Not a week ago, but on Wednesday. The Euro was the first to pick it up, and honestly often is. So I do have experience with what these different models are saying, and and I also have over the years, of course, accrued that experience, and so I'm here to share it with you and all that information that will help you in the path of the storm. Got Levi checking in from Waycross. How's everyone doing? He's asking. Go ahead and leave a comment. Let him know how you're doing. Again, if you like what you're seeing, go ahead and like the video. Go ahead and share with friends. I'm also streaming on YouTube tonight. I got my wife and producer in the living room watching on our smart TV, big, 60-inch TV, so she can see my face probably way too close up right now. And you can see some of these graphics a little better. So if you want to go over and subscribe to the Bearded Weatherman on YouTube, you can watch that on the YouTube app on your smart TV. So that's a pretty cool feature you can use there with YouTube. So of course, if you're on YouTube as well, go ahead and like and subscribe and share with friends. That's always appreciated. Let's get this message out to everyone. All right, that's enough of that stuff up front. So let's all take a deep breath. Okay, our message here, the motto on the page: don't panic. Okay. And we're going to talk about this storm now. We're going to really go in depth. Now, I've been talking about it for a few days. I told you, for those of you in the Bearded Weatherman group, by the way, that's our private group on the page. Go ahead and go over there and request to join. We'll get you in. You'll probably get an invite if you've been engaged on the page automatically. So the Bearded Dragons is the name of the group. If you want to join in there, that's our community on the page where you can share information with friends. You can chat in the chats to get live, more, kind of personal contact, live updates, and I also post in that chat as well. So, all that being said, all the promotion out of the way, let's talk about Idalia. And here she is, Idalia. So here she is down here. If you've been watching the satellite, which of course I've been doing all day, now I just came from work. I'm sorry if it's a little late there on the East Coast, but I do work for an airline, and all day long we were talking about preparations for our operations with the airline there, and we have some flights that go in and out of Orlando, Tampa, Fort Myers, Jacksonville, Vero Beach, so we're all over the state, and I was doing briefings and getting information for the airline about what this storm might bring. And now I'm going to come back here, sit in the comfort of my own home, and talk to you about some of those things that I've been watching all day. So I do want you to notice, look, I've drawn a circle around this storm, and you'll notice that this storm, very circular in nature, right? Very concentric, as we call it in meteorology. And that is definitely a sign of intensification. That means this storm is strengthening right now. All day long, it's been kind of trapped or been kind of impacted by some dry air to the north that was sort of eroding out the north side of that storm. Well, it appears that the storm has gone ahead and shrugged that off a little bit. You can definitely see organization around this storm. That would lead, I would assume, by tomorrow to the National Hurricane Center upgrading this storm to a hurricane. I'm definitely seeing, we're kind of impressive, kind of ahead of schedule. This storm is really organizing very warm water that it's using for its energy source right now. Very warm water down there in the Caribbean. So that is what's going on now. So let's get the latest. I'm going to actually refresh. Get the 10 p.m. Central or 11 p.m. Eastern advisory from the National Hurricane Center. So this is the latest right here. Okay. They have pretty much, there's not been much change to the track. We'll talk about why in a minute. But you see that the track from earlier today not really changed all that much. A few changes you see, though, is that hurricane warnings are now in effect for the western end of Cuba. Okay, hurricane warning is when a hurricane or hurricane force winds are forecasted to be very likely to occur within 36 hours in that area. Okay, and so obviously by tomorrow morning or tomorrow evening, where it shows hurricane over top of Cuba, that's why they're putting out that warning, that they're saying, hey, we think hurricane force winds will definitely be in this area, or very, very, very likely to be in this area by tomorrow night. And again, you see here the forecast now. This has changed a little bit. So again, this is the latest update. This is as of just a few minutes ago from the National Hurricane Center. They now expect hurricane strength, Hurricane Idalia, by tomorrow night. Okay? And I'm telling you right now, I think they're going off of some of the data that they're getting from the satellite loop here. I mean, the system is definitely organizing. You can see thunderstorms starting to form. You see these thunderstorms around the core of the storm, or the eye wall that will eventually form around this system. Let's get the a little bit better color for you to see, but you just see the circular nature around the core, and that's classic for a hurricane, right? Classic for a strong tropical system. So they're seeing that on satellite. Now they're saying, we're going to go ahead and say we think this will be a hurricane a little bit earlier than they anticipated earlier in the day. So earlier they thought hurricane by about here. Now they're saying hurricane here. Now we're going to talk about what that means, okay? But as of now, this is forecasted to continue to be a hurricane all through until landfall, probably around the Big Bend area of the state of Florida, okay? So up there, Steinhatchee, there's Gainesville over here, north of Crystal River in those areas. So these areas, again, I'm a Florida native, so I'm very familiar with some of these areas. Expected by Wednesday morning to potentially have a hurricane making landfall in that Big Bend area. Okay, you also notice these pink shades here. Hopefully you can all see that. Again, that's a good reason to use the YouTube app, because you can put this up on your TV and really see it if you're trying to see this on your phone. But in any case, you can always go over to the National Hurricane Center website. Go ahead and look at this imagery while we're doing this. But you notice hurricane watch now in effect for a large swath of the west coast of Florida. Okay? That means, you see down here, hurricane watch, right? That hurricane force winds are probable, or maybe could occur within the next 48 hours. Okay? And of course you can see here's Monday, here's Wednesday, right? So within the next 48 hours, the National Hurricane Center is saying, watch out. That's the difference between a watch and a warning. A warning is saying, hey, this is coming, right? Like a tornado warning, saying these conditions are imminent or expected, whereas up here now they want you to be on watch. Okay, and the reason that this area is so large is not only could this hurricane, if it intensifies quite a bit, which we're going to talk about. Okay, we're going to talk about whether that could be the case. That this whole area should be ready for that, and because this cone, as you can see, is so large, right? And anywhere in this cone, there is an uncertainty. It's called the cone of uncertainty. There's a possibility that hurricane could go directly overhead. And of course, the center of a hurricane is always the most powerful part of a hurricane, right? So they're saying in that whole area there for Wednesday, be on the lookout. Now you notice that there is still this, the cone is still right over Tampa, okay, and in most of Central Florida, okay, which is where I hail from, right? So if you're there, you're not out of the woods yet. I know you're seeing, you see the guidance. Well, that looks like Big Bend, right? Well, don't sleep on this in any of these areas. That includes all the way over here towards Panama City Beach, right? Mexico City Beach, famously impacted by Michael, caused quite a bit of damage there. So in any of these areas, to include all of North Florida, be on the lookout for, in the next couple of days, a major, potentially, we'll see, we're going to talk about that, potentially a strong hurricane impacting these areas. So we'll talk more about impacts in a second, but I just want to get you updated on the latest from the National Hurricane Center. Let's look at their discussion real quick. I'm just going to kind of browse through this. Yes, large burst convection. These are all real kind of in the weeds information you're seeing here. I'm just kind of getting updated myself because I just saw this. Yeah. Toward motion. Deeper trough. We'll talk about some of the meteorological terminology that's affecting how this storm will move. Sitting over very warm water, 30 degrees Celsius. It's about 86 degrees Fahrenheit in there, high 80s. So very warm, almost bath water. It will be over even deeper warm waters of the loop current, which we'll look at in a second as well, in the next day or so. And the loop current is famous for causing some very intense hurricanes like Katrina, Rita to form, Michael. That loop current is very, very warm water, very deep warm water, and we'll talk about that in a minute. And then there could be some shear, but it's likely to be offset. So we'll look at that. But here's the key point, and that's why I brought this up. I mean, it's kind of busy on there. You don't have to read all of it, but I want you to focus on this. It should be stressed that additional strengthening to major hurricane strength is becoming increasingly likely before Idalia reaches the Gulf Coast of Florida. We're going to talk about some of those factors in just a second, because again, we do a deep dive here on the Bearded Weatherman. I'm going to check in on comments. I've kind of been doing a little in depth in here. I know it's let's see, Jessica, what's going on in Pasadena, Texas? No impacts to Texas. Don't worry. That's not going to happen at this point. Brandy says Winter Garden. We'll talk about again that cone-ish being over Central Florida. You definitely want to make preparations as if this hurricane will go right over top you. And again, it could be a major hurricane at that point. That's Category 3 plus. And anytime you get to that major hurricane status, the damage that can be done is much greater than a Category 1. So just it is to be stressed. And I'm not trying to stress you, no pun intended, or panic anyone. I'm not trying to hype anything. When I talk about these things, I'm talking to you because it is a possibility, and is a possibility that one should be prepared for. And I think anytime we see a storm that does a lot of damage and unfortunately causes loss of life, you could probably drill down into those situations, not to victim blame here, but probably someone didn't take it seriously, you know. But again, as always, if you're in that cone, and I say it every time we have one of these storms, it's not very common, but I certainly stress it whenever one is making an approach. And I've been doing this now for 3 years. In fact, I was looking at, I just happened to glance at an article from a local paper when I first started, my hometown paper, and I saw a picture of me doing the doing the broadcast, and the lighting was horrible. I was like ashamed a little bit, but anyway, you don't care about that. But in any case, I have always stressed, please be prepared in those areas. Levi says, if I know it's too late to tell or too early, but if it takes that more east track, Georgia wouldn't get as much as Florida, correct? That's correct. That's correct. But again, too early to tell. And you look at the current cone. Get that back up here. You'll notice that East Georgia is definitely within that cone. Now, of course, you know, if it makes landfall here at the Big Bend, it won't be as strong as it would be along the Gulf Coast, but you still could see flooding range. You still could see high winds in the area. So it's just because it's not going directly overhead doesn't mean, or I should say, just because maybe the track could shift because there's a cone, right? It could shift, doesn't mean that you shouldn't be prepared for possible power outages, floods, flooding rains in your neighborhood, things like that. So again, if you're in the cone, please be prepared. Don't panic, but be prepared. All right, I'm going to get back to what I'm doing over here. So again, here's the latest forecast. Now let's dive into some of these things that the National Hurricane Center has put out before we go into some of the meteorology. And you know, some of you aren't going to make it all that way, but let's at least get out the major headlines here for this storm. And the first headline, as always, the most important headline with any hurricane is going to be storm surge, right? Storm surge is by far the cause of most deaths with hurricanes, especially, of course, along the coast where those places are impacted. And it is, again, it always just, the large majority, the largest loss of life with a hurricane is storm surge. So we see here a forecast as of tonight, okay? See here, this is tonight, 10 p.m., 11 Central, or Eastern, so this is very new information, that you see forecasted 4 to 7 feet of storm surge within the Tampa Bay area. We're going to look at that in just a second in a little more detail. You see Charlotte Harbor with 2 to 4 feet. Some of those areas could be kind of vulnerable to even 2 to 4 feet of surge, so they want to look out, especially because this is a region that's been was devastated by Ian. 6 to 9 feet up here north of Tampa, going up toward Crystal River and those areas. And then 7 to 11 feet all along the Big Bend here of Florida. And then even surge impacting all the way to the Ocklawakanee River. Ocklawakanee. It's been a while since I've had to pronounce those things. I'm in Utah now. And then Indian Pass even over here by Panama City Beach with 2 to 4 feet. So just take a look at this area here. This is hundreds and hundreds of miles of the Florida coastline, the Gulf Coast, west coast of Florida coastline, potentially going to be impacted by storm surge. And it should be highlighted that these numbers could increase. Okay, and again, I'm not trying to panic anybody, but these numbers could climb because right now the hurricane is forecasted. Let's see the latest here. I didn't get a chance to look at the latest. Okay, so you see here they have increased the top end of this storm now to 110 miles per hour. 110 miles per hour at 48 hours is that would be late night Tuesday, is a Category 3 major hurricane. So they're now predicting a major hurricane to form. Okay, and then it's weakened just slightly over inland, potentially there in the Big Bend area. So again, now we are forecasted to be a major hurricane. This is the headline. This is the news from the National Hurricane Center. So that number has been increased. Again, it could even reach Cat 4. We can't say for sure those things yet, but the intensity the intensity models have definitely increased that strength in the last 12 hours to 24 hours. So storm surge will definitely be a threat, and again, if it does strengthen more, these numbers could be higher. I mean, think about 11 feet or even 7 feet. That's taller than an average adult male, right? So you're immediately underwater in that kind of storm surge. And then you think a little bit higher, 10 feet or more, that's that's your ceiling, right? So it's now flooded your entire house if you're in a flood prone area. So storm surge, always the most important thing, never to take lightly, and always the most hazardous thing in a hurricane. So let's drill a little bit deeper into that. This is a storm surge inundation model. This gives you a sense of some of the flood impacts. Let's kind of zoom in on Tampa, big metro area here. And we're going to look down here. Well, let's go. Yep. Okay. There we go. So you see here, this is from the National Hurricane Center. Okay. And this is for today. In fact, they haven't updated this yet. So these numbers could actually increase. But like, for example, I'll show you something we're monitoring at the airline. That's Tampa International Airport right here. See the big kind of black spot there? You look at even the runways will have some water on them here. There's a runway right here, okay? And you see here greater than 3 feet above ground, the flooding. So let's go back. Let's go in. There it is. And red areas in there. I don't know what this bridge is called here, but some of these bridges over Tampa Bay. And then there's a red here, greater than 9 feet above ground. So again, that kind of flooding close to the airport, you've got greater than 3 feet above ground. So you think about the runway might have 2 feet of water on it, a foot of water. So obviously you don't want to be taking off and landing and those kinds of things. So we're actively canceling flights and moving planes around as we speak. Again, I don't speak for the airline I work for, so I do not use their name. But again, we are definitely paying attention. And you can see all these areas with greater than 6 feet of flooding all through Tampa Bay. Some red, greater than 9 feet. Again, that's higher than an average adult male. It's taller than an adult male. So if you're in these flood-prone areas, you can clearly see where they are. And I think if you live in these areas, you clearly know where they are. You should take this storm very seriously. And once again, these numbers could climb a little bit. This is just a forecast from earlier today. Let's look here at Fort Myers, very impacted by Ian, obviously. and you see blues, foot of flooding, maybe 3, but this again could climb as well. But you see all these flood-prone areas all throughout the Gulf Coast, and this is an area of the country that is very prone to flooding. Now let's go up here to Homosassa Springs in these areas where my parents used to live. Got oranges greater than 6 feet. Here's some reds in here greater than 9 feet. Some of these inlets and bays, so there's Crystal River there with a lot of greater than 9 feet flooding in this area here, which is basically the city of Crystal River. So expect possibly major impacts from flooding in those areas. Okay. All the reds in here with these barrier islands, these estuaries coming up north of there, where you see greater than 9 feet flooding, especially in these areas, and then a little bit, with the 6 feet just behind that. So this is definitely that end of the hurricane that would be. That's the side of the hurricane that's going to be the most impacted by coastal flooding and by storm surge, and that makes sense because as a hurricane approaches the shore, the winds are just driving all this water inland. Okay, very high hurricane force winds pushing water into these inlets and estuaries and bays, and so these areas you definitely want to be on very high alert. Probably you're in an evacuation zone in these areas. I would highly encourage you to evacuate. Don't roll the dice. Look, people worry about looting, and I'm not trying to downplay that kind of thing. It certainly isn't cool. Certainly not right. But you got to balance it with you and your family's lives versus a couple of possessions you have. And certainly these areas are going to be heavily impacted by storm surge. Again, especially if this track continues as it is, and if the eventual strength is greater than what we thought, or what is forecasted currently, the impacts will be even greater. Maybe 11 feet of storm surge, maybe even higher. Depends on how powerful the hurricane ends up being. So there's just a kind of a few areas that we're going to zoom in on that just to show you. Let's look at another danger from hurricanes. That is flash flooding. You see a slight chance right now. They're not ready to go as high as moderate, 40% or above. Normally when a meteorologist says moderate chance of anything, you better head for the hills. Just my experience. And, well, I know because I've done it that I'll say moderate chance because I can't say exactly for sure. You never can. And but that should be heated. But right now, slight. I mean, a lot of these areas maybe not as prone to flash flooding, but we'll be watching this graphic for flash flood risk because that certainly could be the case. There has been a lot of these areas have gotten a lot of rain. Maybe the soil isn't quite as dry, or I should say, is able to take on a little rain. But again, this could potentially change. I mean, flash flooding is certainly a risk around one of these storms. Again, talking about flooding and that risk, we're going to now talk about a rainfall forecast. Again, this is from earlier today, prior to them upgrading this or forecasting this storm to go to a Category 3 major hurricane level. So these numbers will climb. But you see here in your oranges, 6 to 10 inches in a wide area here, 4 to 6 inches along this big corridor over here into the southeast. So we'll dive into that a little deeper. I mean, there's a lot I could talk about here tonight, and I will. And some of you, may not be as interested in going all the way to the end, but I can tell you right now that the information I'll put out is helpful to you potentially as you go forward. Tiffany says, do you think power outages in Pensacola? Right now, the way the track guidance is going, and I'm going to show that in just 1 second because you just brought that up. Pensacola is now one of those areas where it's seeming less and less likely that this storm will impact you. And the reason for that is that initially the models thought the center of the storm may form over here towards the Yucatan a little bit. It now appears this storm is forming over here more so. And so just that difference will impact the track of the storm. To give you a little bit better understanding, let me get a bigger picture here for you, more pulled back version of that satellite. And see, you notice if it would have formed over here, it was expected to kind of just go track straight north. Well, look where that track would take it. Now it's forming over here, so it's expected to go straight north and then jog inland because of a trough that's going to be in place over the United States. We can talk about that in a minute as far as the big picture stuff, the meteorology of it. But in any case, Pensacola looking much less likely to be impacted. Can't rule it out completely. Can't ever do that. But Pensacola is seeming to be less likely to be impacted by this storm, Tiffany. So hopefully, maybe that gives you some encouragement. Okay, so we were talking about some of these impacts. Again, there's some rainfall. Right now, you know, this could climb with a stronger storm, so you want to keep an eye on that. When we talk about some of the probabilities where maybe the stronger tropical storm force winds could be making impact, you do see right here on the outer edge of this probability cone that Tampa Bay is in that cone. See that in the reds? So greater than 70% chance now that tropical storm force winds will impact that area at some point in the next few days. So we're going to talk about that a little bit more in a minute. So these are the areas where we're really looking out, right, for the highest probability for those strong tropical storm force winds and potentially even hurricane force winds. We'll go ahead and look at that probability. As you can see here, some of those areas where the higher probabilities are right now in the yellow, still kind of low, right, 30%. We're still a few days out where we're not totally sure what's going to happen. And then you see these lighter shades, potentially some hurricane force winds over top of the Tampa Bay area as well. So again, that's all going to come down to what the ultimate track is and how strong this storm will be to determine what that ultimate impact will be. Some of the earliest or possible arrival times of those winds, you notice here, Tuesday, 8 a.m., and then that's just a little between there and Tuesday, 8 p.m. So you look at this like Tuesday afternoon, potentially, Tampa Bay may be impacted by strong 39 mile per hour plus winds, tropical storm force winds. So that gives you an early estimate of when that time frame might be. And hey, it's Sunday night, you know. We've just got a couple of days that potentially looking much more likely, in fact, before those winds start to impact your area there in Tampa. So if you're in Tampa, you want to start, if you haven't already done so, be finalizing those preparations, especially along the coast where wind and storm surge are going to be a big threat going into Tuesday. Okay, that pretty much covers what the National Hurricane Center is saying. Now, I've already kind of dove into what this storm is doing. Again, it's concentric, it's circular, certainly is showing signs of strengthening. Got some good outflow here, and so it is expected within the next day to strengthen to a hurricane at this point. So again, that's the forecast. All right, let's look at some of the things behind this forecast. So right now we're looking at just the way this system will be guided. This is the steering flow, the steering winds for this storm, which are up there, high up in the atmosphere, 35,000 feet, somewhere up there. It's those winds that are going to ultimately guide the track of this storm. So let's kind of get a feel for that. So right now you see these, if you can see the arrows here, this pen does crazy things. You see the arrows here are kind of westbound here, eastbound, but out of the west, westerlies. And they're really kind of keeping this storm from escaping from the Caribbean. It's just sort of the gate for the cattle, right? Keeps the cattle from getting out into the field. Well, that's what's happening now with the upper level steering winds. And you see some of them kind of diving down here. It's kind of keeping this system in place. It's pushing on it. It's really not moving it much, right? Well, that will change. At least that's what the forecast is saying right now, and that looks much more likely. You see this trough start to come into place, this U-shaped thing, right? This is up in the upper levels. This is an upper level feature called a trough. This will start to pull on this storm and start to guide it upward, northward, okay? And that's expected here by early morning tomorrow, that you're going to start to maybe see some movement as this storm is let out of the gate. You know, it's been gated up there between Cuba and the Yucatan. Now it will be released out into the Gulf of Mexico and the wilderness to maybe do some serious havoc. We'll see. We'll talk about the intensity guidance, but certainly we all know the Gulf is a bad place for hurricanes to go. It's very warm, and that's not really where we want them to go, but sometimes they do, as we all know. So this trough is starting to guide this system northward. We go forward in time a little bit. Now you start to see that the steering is all, see all the arrows here? This trough is digging in, see the trough? And these arrows, the wind flow in the upper levels is pushing on this storm, starting to kind of guide it through. You see a ridge in place over here. Sort of, it can't go there. That's bad for a hurricane. That's high pressure, and low pressure can't move to high pressure. That's physics. So it wants to go where there's weaknesses in this. So troughs or weaknesses are low pressure, and that's where these systems will go. So you sort of see this channel being created, right? Sort of this zone that the system can move through, right? And so that's what's happening right there in the upper levels for tomorrow night. Okay, this is 4 hours back from midnight Zulu, or 00 Zulu, as we say in the military or in the airline industry. And so that's 4 hours back from England on the East Coast, and daylight time, that's 4 hours back. So that would be 8 p.m. Eastern time on Monday night. So this is tomorrow night we're seeing, and you're starting to see this system move out of the area it's been locked in for the last couple days. Okay, now a big question mark will be, what strength will this system be by then? Because the stronger it is, the less it needs to strengthen to become one of those really powerful major hurricanes. So a question mark right now is definitely, how strong will this system be when it leaves that gate, when it gets out into that very warm water in the Gulf? So we're just gonna have to see. Again, I am seeing signs of strengthening even overnight. So potentially, we're forecasted right now to have a hurricane tomorrow. So the National Hurricane Center thinks this will be a hurricane tomorrow as it leaves this area. Again, we go forward in time, start to see this big upper level trough. This is the long wave trough, very large, high amplitude, long wavelength trough that will guide this system up further north, right? And so that's kind of pulling down into the area, sort of pulling this system upward. And as it continues to go, here we are, this is Tuesday afternoon, 18 Zulu, 6 p.m. in England. That's 2 p.m. on the East Coast. So Tuesday afternoon, continuing forward, you see this system, again, continuing to pull this system up with it. Got this ridge in place over here, blocking it from going over here. Okay, it's not going over there, at least according to the Euro. At this point, we don't think it will have southwest Florida landfall, but tracks do shift. So I don't want anybody to totally, let off the gas on preparations as of yet. It's just a little bit too early to tell, but we're getting there where we're getting a lot better accuracy. But still, that trough, that ridge, and this system wants to find the weakness. So again, there's the lane, right? That's the lane that it's going to try to find between that upper level trough associated with low pressure and this upper level ridge associated with high pressure. And so this is Tuesday night off the coast of Florida, now over that loop current, very warm water. We'll look at that in a second. Continuing on, start to see the trough lose a little bit of its influence and maybe pull this system in over here towards that big bend. It's been kind of arcing that way now. Boom, it's kind of doing that because the ridge is here, the trough is now here, and there's your lane, right? So this is Wednesday morning, noon in England, 8 a.m. on the East Coast, Eastern Daylight Time. So again, that's just looking at the track and what potentially could impact that. We'll look at some other upper level features real quick that are important to this forecast, and this is all the stuff that the National Hurricane Center is looking at right now. So you see the dry air in place right here, right? That's that brown shades. Drier air meaning lower relative humidity values, lower RH, and it's been impacting this storm today. The northern side of this storm was kind of carved out and dry, so there wasn't much convection occurring at that point. Let's go forward in time with this model. See if we got any zero. Okay, no. Continuing with some influence. Now as we go into tomorrow afternoon, you notice that influence starts to wane. You start to see the green shades consolidate around the core of the storm. Now we've got a hurricane, most likely, right? That's the forecast, and so that more moisture is around the core of that system, so it can form that eye wall that it needs to strengthen. Continuing on, now it's really consolidated. That dry air is not as much of an impact over here on the western side of the storm. You see this storm concentric in shape. Good hurricane by this point. Continuing on to see, well, at this point, well, what kind of impact would this dry air that's kind of being sucked in from this direction have on the storm itself? But with the core of the storm likely intact, this is the reason the National Hurricane Center has now forecasted a major hurricane. There's really nothing stopping this storm now from really strengthening. That's the headline. That there's really nothing anymore that's going to stop this storm from really getting to some type of major hurricane strength. And so you see the wind shear now sort of off to the northwest quadrant, not really impacting the center of the storm itself. So the shear is relatively detached from the center of this storm, and that is going to mean additional strengthening. And again, that is why the National Hurricane Center is warning you that there's probably going to be a major hurricane, and potentially even stronger than Cat 3 here, the bottom end of the major hurricane force winds, making landfall in northwest Florida, Big Bend, by Wednesday morning. This is here Wednesday morning, noon Wednesday. So those are some of the factors with the upper levels. We will now dive into the other factors in place. Get this up. This will be a quick one because this is a kind of a obvious thing, but we always look at this. There's another factor that affects hurricanes. Obviously, you have the high winds that destroy a hurricane, wind shear, and then you have dry air that can destroy a hurricane, and that's been impacting this storm for a little while today, but it seems like that's starting to shrug that off a little bit with the latest satellites. And now we're going to look at another factor, which I've talked about quite a bit on here. Just find that tab. I didn't have it up. Sorry, I was coming home from work and kind of rushed in here to do this. So we're going to talk about oceanic heat content. So once this storm breaks out of its gate, as you see here, right, it then moves into an area of very deep, warm water, uniformly deep or uniformly warm, deep ocean water, about down to 300 feet of the top layer of the ocean, that is very warm. And that the deeper that layer, and the warmer it is, that creates much more heat energy source for this hurricane to utilize. And so if you don't have dry air impacting the storm, if you don't have wind shear ripping the storm apart, now all the storm's got left to do is just suck up all that gasoline it uses for its rocket fuel, and it just blows up. Sometimes that happens, and you call that rapid intensification, where these storms strengthen quite a bit over a 24-hour period. Now, as to whether or not that will actually occur, we don't know yet. But looking at some of these factors, and again, looking at the statement from the National Hurricane Center, don't be surprised, and certainly be prepared for the possibility of a Category 3 or 4, maybe even 5. I mean, it's possible. I don't know if it's going to have quite the environment for that, but that's a possibility. But definitely start to look at this forecast now for Category 3 major hurricane now from the National Hurricane Center, and their cautionary statement that this could potentially intensify even further than that. And looking at the meteorological conditions, that is looking, I would say, likely. And look, I'll kind of wrap it up from here. I mean, I could talk for days and hours. I mean, I'll show you one more thing here in a minute as far as potential timing. But I said already about this storm back on Wednesday when the Euro first forecasted, the very steady, reliable Euro model, that that it was one that I was watching closely. Okay, and I'm not here. Not here to brag, but over the years I've been able to sort of separate the wheat from the chaff in these model data and look at the different regions. A lot of these factors I'm showing you start to put them together. And I looked at this storm and I said, well, if this storm can do a couple things, is from the region that it's forming, it will potentially be a big time threat to the southeast and the state of Florida. And here we are, So, yeah, if you're in Central Florida, East Central Florida, where I'm from, and you're looking at this track and you're saying, it's nothing, we'll get some wind and rain, and we'll show you the models and what they're saying now. You still want to understand that, I'm not saying it'll happen, but you understand this cone is right here. The middle of this storm could pass right over close to Orlando and Daytona Beach and those areas. Lakeland. There's Orlando right there. Right? That's the I-4 corridor. I just drew a line right through it. So don't sleep on it. Don't sleep on it. Don't panic. But this is why, not to lecture, but we talk about getting that preparedness ready at the beginning of hurricane season every year. I mean, for those first few months, you kind of sit back and you're lulled into a false sense of contentment because nothing's on the horizon, right? Well, this time of year is that time of year when the activity vastly increases. The oceans have been baking all summer and they're primed now for an event like this. So here we go. This is potentially that event for this year. Not saying there might not be another one. It's always possible. But this certainly is that time frame right there towards the end of August or September, late August, early September, when we see the most powerful hurricanes typically, when we see this jump in activity. And so here we are at that point right now. So again, I think about all you out there, and I hope that you're going to stay safe. Karen says, does it have a possibility of shifting? Absolutely. Absolutely. I was just kind of mentioning that. It definitely is. There definitely is a possibility of some shift in this track. Looking less likely to occur towards the west, but still possible to shift a little bit to the right. Now, let's look at the models real quick. Again, I could talk all night about it. I got my. Yeah, there it is. Let's get a sense of some of the spaghetti models and what they're saying. To give you a sense of why this track is what it is, we'll start with the Euro, the latest Euro, okay? And there's the sort of track cone. These are all different scenarios that the model plays out, okay, and with different environmental conditions being, sort of changed here, adjusted there, and then it games out that scenario. It runs a model. It runs a scenario based on atmospheric conditions that are present now and that are forecasted to be that way in the next few days. So obviously the further out you go, the less accurate it can be because we don't know exactly what those environmental conditions will be in a few days. And we will very likely, at least not for the next 100 years, know it with infinite detail exactly what every little interaction that there is in the atmosphere. It's just too complex of a system. So you can see that in the next few days that cone is sort of restricted to a smaller area right here, but then as you go out further in time, that area widens quite a bit. That cone widens. Okay, so right now the center of that cone is the most likely track, the most likely scenario in the atmosphere, and the most likely place that hurricane will go. So that's why the National Hurricane Center's forecast track cone looks like that. It's basically shaped like this, right? Maybe a little bit. See, you even have a couple of these spaghettis off going into Tampa and going right over Central Florida. Now that's what's called the outlier, so that's a less likely scenario, but still possible. And so anywhere in this cone, and the Euro, I kind of swear by the Euro as being in the meteorology community. It's well known that this is the most accurate model out of the UK. The UK, that's where meteorology was born in the United Kingdom. So they're really good at it. So they make a good model. But this is just my experience telling me. And again, this could be off. Maybe this cone should be further this way or further that way. We don't know yet. But again, less and less likely that these areas over here will be impacted by this storm, just based on the location of it. Most likely scenarios are going to be this way, and then it's going to be under the influence of that trough. Now, how strong will that trough be? How deep will it be? How much will it impact the track of this storm is still to be determined. It's going to have a lot to do with ultimately where this system will go. And also, this ridge over here, over the Bahamas, will tell us a lot too. Is it going to be stronger and higher in amplitude? Well, that's going to guide the storm further north. Well, is it weaker, and this is maybe a little deeper? That'll guide the storm in further south. So it's really, again, we're getting in there to that time frame of landfall, potentially, or at least of this making impact on the state of Florida, this Idalia. And we're getting a better idea, but there's still some question marks. Still some question marks. And unfortunately, that's just the way it is with this game, with forecasting. And I wish I could tell you more definitively, hey, there in wherever your town is, hey, this is what's going to happen. I just can't. All I can tell you is it to get prepared as if it will go right over you if you are in that cone. I think that's a lesson that some folks unfortunately learn the hard way. And again, not to victim blame, but people learned this the hard way. They were there in Fort Myers. Tragically, that cone did shift a little bit, but they were still in that cone the whole time, just on the outside edge of it, right? And so they kind of let their guard down, some people, and tragically, people lost their lives. A lot of people lost their lives. So, especially along the coasts of the west coast of Florida, be prepared for a powerful hurricane to make landfall. I'll show you one more thing, and then I'm going to get out of here. We're talking a lot about weather already. Kind of shut down some of these. There we go. All right, one more thing. We got the latest. We don't. Let's focus in. Let's actually zoom in and do give you kind of a time frame based on not the Zulu time you got to sit there and convert in your head, but actual timestamps. This is from Pivotal Weather, great website. I'm going to take a little sip here because my mouth's starting to go dry from talking so much. There you go. Cheers, everybody. This is for the state of Florida, and you can see here that there's a timestamp at the top, so pay attention to that. Like I said, this is a great reason to go ahead and watch this on your smart TV through the YouTube app, right? You can stream it live, and then you can watch and see what I'm drawing. If you're on their phone, it's a lot harder, obviously, but you can listen to what I'm saying and get the picture. But here's 11 p.m. tonight. This is for currently. You see no hurricane, nothing in the Gulf right now. Very little precip or showers or anything right now over most of the state. Let's go forward in time here. Now here we are going into the early part of the week. That's Monday. There's your storm. You can definitely see it coming into the picture now. Starting to see some of those bands associated with those feeder bands right here. See these feeder bands of some strong thunderstorms out on the edges of the storm. So those are starting to approach west central Florida by even as early as Tuesday morning. Okay. Move forward in time, move forward in time. There's the storm. Now it's 8 p.m. Tuesday. Pretty well offshore at this point, according to the Euro. Now a hurricane, 979 or 76 millibars. That's probably, or that's a Category 1 hurricane, I should say. Now you see what's going to happen as we get into this point, right? By Tuesday night, is this wind, it's flowing right up the coast. This is southerly wind. It's going to start pushing water into the bays and inlets here, right? We talked about the storm surge forecast. That water is now being pushed up into those areas by strong tropical storm force winds on the outer edges of this storm. So storm surge is going to start increasing by this time. Now by Wednesday, late night, or I should say early morning Wednesday, late night Tuesday, now you've got some of this these isobars over Tampa Bay. So now you have probably tropical storm force winds starting to impact the area, and you got even more water getting pushed up in here into Tampa Bay and in here into up there Crystal River area and those areas by this time frame on early morning Wednesday. Again, also water getting pushed up here. So remember, wind flows counterclockwise around a low pressure. So that wind is all going to be southerly, and it's all going to be pushing that water into those inlets and bays. Okay, so this is the time frame you would like to look at here, Tuesday late night for West Central Florida and Southwest Florida, as storm surge really starting to impact the area by those times. And also some winds, some gusty winds, especially over by the coast, even some tropical storm force winds over here of 39 miles per hour, greater sustained winds. So probably going to be some branches coming down. Might see a little power loss. But definitely storm surge will be the big thing in these areas. Now you start to see some very heavy rains start to come on shore of the Tampa area by early morning, just before sunrise on Wednesday morning. Here we go, right? 5 a.m. Eastern time. Very strong rain bands coming on, dumping water in there, maybe doing some flooding in certain areas of that city. Again, you've got all this water being pushed now into these areas of the Panhandle, the Big Bend, up there, Steinhatchee. This is down by Crystal River. You're going to get your peak storm surge right around this time frame here on Wednesday morning. Oops, sorry. Back to where we were. Now, by this point, potentially a Category 3 hurricane. About to make landfall near probably Steinhatchee's up there, these areas. There's Gainesville. So very fast moving wind, the fastest, the strongest wind starting to come on shore right around the core of the system. You see where these lines are really packed in close? That's a tight pressure gradient. The closer those isobars are to each other, that's called isobaric packing in meteorology. The tighter that wind gradient is. Think of a hose, of the Venturi effect. When you squeeze on the end of a hose, you set up a little high pressure cell and you force the water out at a faster rate, right? It runs out there faster. Well, think about that in the atmosphere. You're just constricting down the air pressure and making air flow much faster through through that gradient, through the lines of the isobars, or lines of equal barometric pressure. In any case, the strongest winds are now coming on shore by Wednesday morning, at least if this model is accurate. Again, this could shift this way. It could even shift as far as this way in these areas. So you could have your strongest winds coming on shore maybe a little bit earlier in the day, or overnight. And the further south it comes in, the quicker that time frame will be. The sooner it will be, because it doesn't have as much distance to travel. So again, these could be a time frame. This could be a time frame that you might want to look for impacts from that wind if that system does shift. And again, if it does shift that much, now you've got the right side of this storm, the most powerful side of the hurricane, right over top of Orlando. That's always been the nightmare scenario. Okay, is a strong Category 4 or 5 hurricane making landfall just to the west in Tampa, traveling directly over Orlando with the strongest right front quadrant, the strongest winds right around the eye wall, impacting that area. Again, we don't know if that's going to be the case, but preparations should be in place. You're in the cone, I don't want to. Again, I'm not trying to be alarmist. I'm not trying to scare anyone or make you panic. The most likely scenario is this track right now. Okay, but it does not take you out of the woods in these areas. Again, the strongest winds could be coming on shore here. Panama City could be getting those strongest winds, right? So, traditionally the strongest winds right around the core of this storm. So let's watch where that goes. And there it is, right on shore, making landfall by 11 a.m. on Wednesday, potentially, with the strongest, potentially even major hurricane force winds right in these areas. Potentially even right outside Gainesville and Tallahassee by Wednesday morning, if this track holds up. You're going to see wobbles in this track. I can guarantee that. That's called entropy. That's degradation of accuracy, chaos theory, whatever you want to call it. Ian Malcolm, Jurassic Park. You will see changes to this forecast. There will be wobbles in this forecast. So don't take this as the exact track it's going to take. It won't be. Especially as we go out further in time. Okay. Take a deep breath. I've been talking for a while, God. How long have I been talking? An hour and a half. I must really love this stuff, huh? No, it's not an hour. Yeah. No, not an hour. What is it? Sorry. An hour and 1 minute. Okay, I must love talking about this stuff. Maybe I'm talking you to death. You're probably bored by now. Levi says right over Waycross. Well, a possibility is there, Levi. Anywhere in this cone. I'm going to end with this note. Anywhere in this cone. Anywhere in this cone, plan as if this hurricane, or potentially even major hurricane of Category 3 and above, will go directly overhead. One more thing, and I'll close it down. Not maybe on a morbid note, maybe, but it's certainly something that you want to take seriously. That I've shown before. Hopefully I'll find it again. Okay, this will work for us. No, that's a little too involved. Let's go. Yeah, this will work. Okay. Got some ads here, but I'll just use this one. I don't want to get any kind of copyright infringement or something. This is a graphic from the National Hurricane Center, so hopefully it's open source. Anyway, you don't care about that. But this is it. This is the difference between a Category 1. Look, the palm trees kind of swaying there. Water comes up a little bit, right? But basically, no roof tile. You're not losing any roof tiles. Minimal damage, right? Then let's go up to Category 2. Now a little bit of moderate damage occurring. The storm surge is coming up a little ways further. Got the palm trees kind of bending in the wind, right? That's your 96 to 110 mile per hour winds. Now we go to Category 3. 111 or greater. Okay. Now we talk about extensive damage. You notice here you lose a few roof tiles. Now you're losing a lot of your roof tiles. The tree's completely bent over. Storm surge is flooding the house. It's being pushed on shore. So the damage in a major hurricane, this is where we start here with major hurricane, extensive. And now let's look at extreme Category 4 damage. Now the house is completely flooded and the houses in the neighborhood are flooded. That storm surge has been completely pushed on shore. The tree's gone, right? No more tree. And most of the tiles on the roof have blown off. Maybe even that roof is damaged beyond repair or lifted a little even. This is extreme damage. This is your 130 to 156 mile per hour. And no real reason to harp on this one. Category 5, catastrophic damage. The house is completely gone. You're completely flooded up to the roof. And so there you go. Especially along the coastlines, guys. That's the major hazard, is when you are along the coastlines. All right. If you've got any final comments here. Enjoying the info. Thank you, says Brandy. You're welcome. Thank you, Brandy, for the support. as always, if you want to support the page, go ahead and throw a like on the video and share with friends. That's always good. Get that information out there to the folks who need it the most, that are affected by these storms. You can send stars to support the page. That's always it's always appreciated. I don't do this for money, really. So again, glad everybody's out there is you're enjoying it, and that you're getting this information, and hopefully you go and share it with friends so that they have that information when the time comes when they really need it. But again, there's your cone. If you're in the cone, be ready. If you're just outside the cone, be ready. But less likely, it's looking less likely that the extreme western end of the Panhandle will be impacted as of right now. Always possible, but much less likely at this point. All right, I'm gonna head out. I will do an update maybe in the morning. I gotta see. I will be posting throughout the day tomorrow, and I'll definitely be on tomorrow night. Earlier than this, I'll be on probably around dinner time to give you the latest from the National Hurricane Center, and really going to have a lot of updates coming on that live video. So really, if tune into that